Hey everybody, Lauren Cohn here. Welcome back to the channel. Yes, that's one of the greatest bass lines of all time. I'll take you there, Staples Sisters. And today, I'm going to do something a little different. We're going to talk about that bass line, but not specifically, just how to play that bass line. We're going to use that bass line as a template for going into some of the most important things that you need to be looking out for whenever you're grooving, whenever you're approaching any bass line, especially a bass line like that may seem simple, but actually has a lot of little areas that could be problematic. We're going to first talk about things I'm looking out for, what I call my groove rules. Here we go. Number one, the start of the note. This has to do with not rushing the attack, not rushing where we begin the note. When we have bass lines like this one, we'll talk about it more in a second, where there's syncopation, right, where we're starting on upbeats. The tendency can be to rush those upbeats. So really number one is the start of the note, okay, not rushing the start of the note. And then next, the end of the note, super important, something that horn players think a lot about, and this is the end of the note duration, the note cutoff. We need to think about that a lot as bass players too. What value is this note getting? Is it getting full value? Is it short? Where are we going to cut that note off? Number three, articulation and sound. So this is super important, and this really has to do with consistency. I've talked about this in one of my previous videos where I talked about synchronizing both hands, and this is about consistency of our touch across strings and consistency of our sound. We want our articulation and our sound to be even. Next, more on consistency, the consistency of our pulse, basically keeping a steady beat, okay, making sure that we're not dragging or rushing. And one thing that's really important to be aware of here is making sure that we're not dragging or rushing within the bar, but also through the entire phrase. So I've noticed one of my tendencies, and I've noticed with a lot of students of mine, is sometimes when we're playing even just a 2-bar phrase, as we're playing the entire phrase, there's often a tendency to rush, not just within the bar, but we're getting to the end of the phrase. It's super important and something that we really need to be aware of. Consistency of our time and our pulse within the bar and across the entire phrase. And then next, the last of my 5 groove rules, and this is feel. This is, probably next to consistency of our groove, consistency of our time and our pulse, how it feels. This is basically, where we're sort of placing the notes within the bar. And when it comes to feel, for me, I try and keep things as broad and sort of laid back without dragging. When you hear people talk about in the pocket or in the cut, this is, our feel, where we're placing the beat within the bar. So once again, start of note, end of note, consistency of articulation, consistency of our time of the pulse, and then lastly, feel, how we are placing the notes within the bar and how our time feels. Okay, so now with those groove rules in mind, let's just have a look at the bass line of I'll Take You There. Now this is one of these bass lines that may seem really simple, but it's actually a few different places in here that we need to be aware of, a few different sort of spots that consistently I see sorts of things that throw us off, that can really, get us to violate those groove rules. Okay, so first off, the first thing that if I was looking at this bass line, the first thing that I would be aware of is the syncopation. Okay, syncopation is when we are emphasizing, other parts of the beat besides the downbeat. A lot of the groove happens on the upbeats, on the ands. So as soon as I see these upbeats, I become, aware of, okay, especially like here, I really have to watch my attack. Okay, I cannot rush this note. Being aware of not rushing these upbeats. More upbeats here. Okay, being aware of that. The other thing, be aware of open strings. Okay, open strings are great, but the problem with open strings is you can't really control them very easily. So your first tendency when playing this groove may be to play, right, open A there. And that can work great, but just be aware that the open strings you can't control. So sometimes if I'm playing a groove like this, I may actually play that A closed. I may go, okay, I may play that on the E string. And I get it, that's a bit more real estate that I have to cover with my left hand, but I'm more confident that I can control that. Another thing to be aware of, whenever we have eighth note lines, this can be a problem area because what did I say? A lot of times we tend to rush at the end of phrases. So I know when I was practicing this, I noticed sometimes by the time I got here, I could see that the phrase was starting to pick up a little bit in tempo. Okay, and especially when we're ending the phrase with an eighth note line like this, that can be the tendency to rush. All right. So first thing I'm going to do is play this bass line with a click just on downbeats, and then I'm going to add the eighth note subdivision, which is really going to help us to dial in these upbeats. 3, 4. Ah. Okay, so now I'm going to add in eighth note subdivision. 1, 2, 3, 4. Not rushing. Okay, so even on that pass, very aware of when I got here, feeling like, okay, it could be real easy for me to rush these things. And also realizing, if I have to practice this, that consistency of the sound is going to be super important. A great bass line to work on this stuff on, seemingly simple, but a lot of little areas that could give us a lot of problems. Work on these groove rules, apply them when you're working on your bass lines. Be very intentional about how you're approaching your bass lines and how you're approaching your groove. And sometimes when I'm playing a bass line like this, I actually will use my third finger. If you want to learn about my approach for that technique, click here.